Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto married Ino Yamanaka in the future. 16-year-old Ino is stuck in the body of her older self. Now she must embark on the journey of an adult, a wife, and a mother while deep down she's still just a child herself. What does the future have in store for her? Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 29, The Deep End. With 37-year-old Ino, Naruto wasn't crying. Nor did he show any sign of morbid depression. Instead, he seemed to be in deep thought, but his eyes were puffy and swollen, which was evidence of fallen tears. Ino had found him like this on a bench outside Konoha's hospital. She mentally kicked herself for jumping to conclusions. Shikamaru never said anything about Naruto being in tears or inconsolable. No, as always, her friend had seen a man in pain, a man who was hiding it, and thought perhaps she should be there for him. Maybe get him to open up. Or maybe Shikamaru just thought Naruto would like to see her. Ino nearly collapsed beside the bench. Her legs were sore since she had pushed herself to run faster than she normally would. "Hey," Naruto greeted her, but his voice did not carry the same energy as usual. Ino looked up at him. "Hey." The two stared at each other in utter silence. "Guess we both lost a teacher now, huh?" Naruto broke the silence. Ino frowned, not following, until she remembered that Asuma had passed away in this dimension. She swallowed thickly and nodded. Naruto smiled weakly. "Shikamaru found me moping. He then dragged me here." Naruto pointed at the hospital as he said this. Ino frowned, trying to figure out just why exactly Shikamaru had bothered to bring a upset Naruto to a hospital. He was not physically injured, and no medic could heal a broken heart. And then it clicked and Ino gasped. "Kurenai?" she asked. Naruto nodded. "Yeah," he exclaimed excitedly. "She was huge, like, pregnant huge." Ino chuckled softly. In the past few days, Ino had found herself really thinking about the dimension she was in. There were many similarities she had found, events that had occurred in both dimensions. But there was also many differences. People were dead here that were supposed to be alive. And people were alive here that were supposed to be dead. And then there was Sasuke. He had been gone for nearly 3 years. Naruto had told her the story. Orochimaru was dead, but Sasuke had made no move to return. It was these thoughts that made Ino really analyze the differences. Back in her dimension, Sasuke had left Konoha for a year at most. The young man had become impatient with Orochimaru, and when the news of Itachi's heart attack had reached him, Sasuke saw no more point in remaining with the Sannin. The outcome of his return had meant he never committed any heinous crimes and therefore was not severely punished. He was able to reunite with Karen, who he had met in his first month with Orochimaru. Here, however, it was a completely different story, and Ino concluded that it meant any future events would not be exactly the same as in her dimension either. And she feared that if she stayed longer, it could mean she might be put in danger. If she died in this body, younger Ino would not have a body to return to. So, Ino had promised herself that she would find a way to reverse the jutsu as soon as possible. She knew that it was possible that she was dying slowly right now. That had been the outcome of the previous time she had used the jutsu. And with the way events were turning out, she knew a war was coming. Perhaps not one the same as the one of her youth, but a war nonetheless. And this world needed its Ino, not her. "Ino." Naruto's voice snapped Ino out of her reverie. She hadn't even noticed that she was spacing out. "Sorry," Ino apologized, "I was just thinking about how the two dimensions really are different, but still so similar. But enough about that, how are you?" Ino stood up and sat down on the bench next to Naruto. The floor was getting uncomfortable. Naruto sighed and closed his eyes. "I'm okay, I guess," Naruto muttered. "Shikamaru knocked some sense into me and Iruka-sensei consoled me last night. But it's hard." Ino smiled sadly and reached out to grasp Naruto's hand. He allowed her to lace their fingers together. "I know it's hard," Ino whispered. "I might not have lost my teacher, but I've lost my teammate. And my best friend." Naruto looked at her, alarmed. She had never told him that Asuma was still alive in her dimension. In fact, she hadn't gathered the courage to tell Shikamaru and Chuji either. It just didn't feel right, telling them she still had dinner and laughs with their teacher, but they no longer couldn't. Asuma isn't dead? Naruto asked. Not in my dimension, no, Ino replied. Oh, was all Naruto could muster to say. Chuji, however, wasn't so lucky, Ino whispered with a choke. She felt Naruto's hand squeeze hers. Sakura wasn't lucky either. Naruto's grip on her fingers went slack and Ino berated herself for brining up the subject of dead companions. Now she had made him even more depressed. Did she die alone? Naruto finally asked. Ino turned to face him, hoping to see if he was upset or not. He merely looked tired as he stared on ahead. No, Ino decided to assure him. No, she was not alone. Kakashi was with her. Good. As long as she didn't die alone. Sakura doesn't deserve that. Ino smiled weakly. She debated telling him the full truth, to reveal that although Kakashi had been with her, she had died in an explosion and her body was never recovered, obviously blown to bits. Her grave was empty, merely a stone slab for those who needed the peace of mind. But one glance at Naruto and his current state of mind and she decided against it. No, he didn't need to know. At least not yet. Oh. Naruto suddenly perked up. He turned to face Ino. Shikamaru asked me to help decode Jiraiya's message. Apparently he left 3 sources of evidence for us. And since I knew him so well they think I could help. That's great, Ino cheered. But, I have to go now, Naruto stated, and I don't know how long it's going to take. I was supposed to help you with finding a way to contact the other side. We were going to go to Suna, right? Don't worry about it. But I want to help. Naruto protested. Ino chuckled and reached out to stroke his cheek. It was a habit of hers, touching his cheeks. She liked the texture of his whiskers beneath her fingertips. This was, however, the first time she has touched this Naruto's face like this. She had missed it. Don't worry, I'll figure something out, Ino repeated. Naruto pouted, but his face soon melted into an expression of content. Ino was still gently stroking his cheek and it was sending shivers down his spine, but in a good way. He had never been touched like this before, and he liked it. He had not been aware that his whiskers were so sensitive. Ino stopped stroking Naruto's cheek when a thought occurred to her. She was hoping to be able to meet with Gaara, to see if he had the same abilities as the Gaara she knew. But she very well knew that Tsunade was not going to let her go alone, and Ino did not really want to go with anyone else. But perhaps she didn't have to travel all the way to test the theory of Gaara's abilities. Naruto, I think I have an idea. Yeah? Naruto asked, intrigued. Do you think you could convince Kudash? Ino suddenly trailed off. Naruto looked at her, puzzled. Ino pursed her lips. Did Naruto know Kurama's name yet? It was possible, since the dimensions events weren't always adding up, but she probably shouldn't risk it. It was not her place to tell Naruto the Kyuubi's name. Do you think you could convince the Kyuubi to do me a favor? Naruto just blinked, surprised. You know. What? About you being the Jinchuriki? Yes, of course. Oh. I didn't know all of you knew. I don't think everyone in our group quite knows yet, Ino replied. They might have their suspicions. And you have to remember, I'm married to you in a different dimension. Of course I would know. Right, of course, Naruto muttered. Then he frowned. What do you mean by favor? Ino smiled. Precognition in a sensitive mind is not the only psychic abilities Gaara has. He can also use telepathy, but not on a very large scale. And when I say large scale, I mean he can't use it on humans. Telepathy? Naruto asked, surprised. Wait, what's that? Ino rolled her eyes. Of course he didn't know, or never bothered to remember the word. He can read minds or communicate with others through the mind. Really? Naruto asked. That's so cool. Ino laughed at his sudden excitement. Yeah, I suppose it is. Anyway, It just occurred to me that Gaara can communicate with the Biju. All Jinchuriki can, Naruto pointed out, obviously not fully understanding what she meant. Yes, you can communicate internally with the Biju sealed within you, but Gaara can communicate with all of them, even over long distances. Naruto's eyes widened. And they can talk back. Ino nodded. So, Naruto began, you want the Kyuubi to send Gaara a mind message or something. And if he responds, then he can obviously communicate with the other dimension. Something like that, yes, Ino responded. Well, I can try to ask him. He's a grumpot though and might tell you to mind your own business. Ino laughed. I am well aware that he is a grumpot. You ask him first, and if he refuses to cooperate, I'll use mind transfer to talk to him myself. Although only if you consent. You can talk to him inside of me? Naruto asked, surprised. Ino fought the urge to roll her eyes. Only if I take over your body. I suppose that should be okay, Naruto said. Just don't look where you are not supposed to. Ino smirked. I wouldn't dream of it. 16-year-old Ino. Happy birthday, Minato. The crowd cheered as the little boy blew out the 6 candles on his cake. Only one remained burning and Kaguya laughed as she told him he obviously had a girlfriend hidden somewhere. He did not understand and quickly blew the last candle out. He didn't want a girlfriend, girls were scary. Minato cheered happily as his friends and their parents clapped. Ino then proceeded to slice the cake, calling out to everyone to line up for a slice. Minato was served first, since he was the birthday boy. Then all the guests were served, leaving the rest of the family to last. After everyone had had their share of cake, the children all gathered in the living room to open presents. Ino sat on the couch behind Minato, who was sitting on the floor and excitedly ripping apart wrapping paper. Naruto joined her and wrapped his arm around her shoulders, his affectionate gaze focused on the little boy sitting by his feet. Ino could do nothing but smile. The first present he opened was from Kaguya, a collection of scrolls and books on becoming a ninja. Ino raised an eyebrow, she wasn't sure if that was really an appropriate gift for a boy who had just turned 6. Minato seemed to be confused too, since he was staring at the items with a frown on his face. Remember how you asked me to train you last year? Kaguya asked, noticing the confused look on her little brother's face. Minato nodded. Well, I will show you some tricks, and you'll need to know the rules. So I got you the books. Don't worry, I'll help you read them. Minato's eyes lit up. Really, sis? You'll show me how to throw a kunai, and shuriken? And how to use mommy's mind transfer? Kaguya nodded. Yeah, although we might wait before trying mind transfer. You can't even mold chakra yet. And I'm only going to show you basics. You're too young for dangerous stuff. Minato pouted, but he still seemed very excited. Ino smiled. She had not been aware Minato was so keen on becoming a ninja. Perhaps this would be good for him and Kaguya both. Ino had no doubt that Kaguya would teach Minato properly so that one day he would become a fine ninja. The next present was from Naruto. He had insisted on buying a present himself when Ino suggested they buy something for him together. Ino had agreed, and she hoped Naruto didn't buy something idiotic or dangerous. It was a toy kunai set. For your training, Naruto stated when Minato looked at him. Minato's eyes lit up. Ino turned to Naruto, surprised. Toy kunai. Can't have him throwing real ones yet, Naruto replied. Kaguya approached me about her gift idea, she wanted to know if it was okay. I gave her my permission, but on the condition that they use toy weapons for the time being. You're smarter than I thought you were, Ino whispered as she rested her head on his shoulder. Naruto laughed and squeezed her shoulder. Thank you for looking out for them. I was worried about him training with real weapons, he's so young. He is, but he is very excited to become a ninja like you. Me? Ino asked, surprised. Not you. Naruto laughed. Have you not noticed how our kids look up to you? But, Ino trailed off. You're the Hokage. You're the hero. You're more powerful than I am. Why am I the role model? I think I scare them. There's stories about me out there, Ino, Naruto stated, stories that they hear from others, and I think sometimes they see me as this big shadow that looms over them. But you're amazing, Ino whispered. And so are you, he retorted. It's all right. I don't expect them to worship me. Their love is enough. The two remained silent as Minato continued to open his presents. From Ino he had received a set of planes he had to assemble himself. He also received stuffed toys, some books, and even money. Once all the presents were unwrapped, Ino reminded Minato to say thank you to everyone. He stood up and bowed, saying thank you to everyone in the room. After that the children went outside to play. While the adults all sat in the living room, talking amongst themselves, Ino was in the kitchen preparing tea. Hinata joined her. Ino noticed that Hinata seemed to be down. Are you well? Ino asked. Yes, Hinata replied. I just have trouble sleeping, that is all. Do you want to talk? Hinata smiled weakly. It's nothing, really. I've just been thinking about what you said. Ino raised an eyebrow. Hinata laughed softly. You suggested that Masahiro take the new seat on the council for the Hyuga family, Hinata said. You want me to be able to move to Suna. If Masahiro proves himself, the clan might accept him as their leader. Oh yeah, Ino muttered, remembering the unexpected turn of events when Naruto had discovered the council was doing things behind his back. I'm sorry, does it bother you that I said that? Hinata shook her head. She poured some tea into cups. Not at all, in fact, I am grateful. Ino noticed that Hinata's eyes were glossy. Are you crying, Hinata? Ino asked, flabbergasted. Hinata looked up alarmed and quickly put down the teapot to wipe her face. I'm sorry, she hiccuped, it's just, you're the only person who seems to notice how much the distance gets to me. I hate being apart from Gaara. But because I am the head of the Hyuga family, nobody cares about the sacrifices I make, or my happiness. Ino felt her heart bleed for her friend. She wished she could just wipe all these problems away, give Hinata her happy ending. But she knew that was not in her power. However, she was going to stand by Hinata's side. I've been laying awake at nights, thinking about the possibility of Masahiro taking over, Hinata explained, her voice cracking since the tears were now rolling down her cheeks. I would love for it to happen, but the Hyuga elders will never allow me to live in Suna. They don't want another country to have the Byakugan, even though they accepted Gaara into the family when we got married. They trust him, but not his village. Oh, I'm sorry, Hinata. I let my mouth run away with me. I never should have said it, I'm just making things complicated for you. Hinata shook her head and smiled. Don't you see, Ino? You made me think and I have found a solution. Really? Ino asked, surprised. Hinata nodded, a sudden look of determination on her face. I'm going to let them give me the cursed seal. So when I die, the Byakugan will be sealed. Ino's eyes widened. Hinata remained still, her determination not wavering. The Hinata that stood before Ino now was nothing like the young 16-year-old girl she knew in her dimension. This Hinata was strong and was willing to brand herself with the seal that was used for the branch family just so that she could be with the love of her life. Are you sure? Ino asked hesitantly. Hinata nodded. The seal is no longer used as often as in the past, there are actually several branch family members that do not have the seal. I won't allow it to be used like in the past, but this is the only way I can assure the elders that my Byakugan won't fall into the wrong hands. Ino pursed her lips. Hinata was determined and she knew nothing was going to change the Hyuga's mind. Why is the tea taking so long? Naruto's voice suddenly interrupted as he stepped into the kitchen. Ino and Hinata tore their gazes away from each other and looked at him. Sorry, Hinata apologized. We got distracted. The party had been a huge success, but all good things had to come to an end. Minato was said to say goodbye to his friends, but he was also excited to play with his new toys. And he couldn't wait to start training with Kaguya. Thank you, Ino, Karen thanked the blonde as the Uchiha family prepared to leave. The food was fantastic. My pleasure, Ino hummed. She was glad the party had gone so well. Little Mikoto gurgled in Karen's arms, causing the two women to giggle. Ino said the final goodbyes to several more people, then with a sigh she closed the door. She'll have to clean up now. Fun. Tired? Naruto asked. Yeah, Ino replied. Kids are crazy business. You're telling me, Naruto laughed. You get used to it, though. Ino turned to the living room and collapsed on the couch. She just needed a small break, then she would start cleaning up the mess. Naruto joined her, his arm once again wrapping around her shoulders. Ino snuggled closer to him, enjoying the warmth and comfort he gave her. Thanks for letting throw him a party, Ino whispered. You had a very convincing argument. This is going to sound weird, but somehow I wish your Ino could have been here, Ino mumbled. She felt Naruto stiffen. It would have been nice, yes, Naruto agreed. I'm sorry, that was probably not the best thing to say. She missed her son's birthday. I feel like I've stolen something precious. Naruto chuckled and planted a kiss on Ino's forehead, catching her off guard. He'll have more birthdays. And don't apologize, you are important too. Ino blushed. The two remained cuddling in silence as the guilt started to gnaw at Ino. Here she was, happily sitting in the arms of a married man. And although he was married a different version of her, she knew it was wrong. And she had to stop herself from falling for him. But that was just the thing, the heart was not easily controlled and she had already fallen in too deep. Letting go was not going to be easy. Chapter 30, Confrontations. Karen hummed an old lullaby she still remembered from her days in Kyusagakure as she fed Mikoto. The thought of another infant in the household in a few months was daunting, but also exciting. Karen loved all of her children, but she really wished Sasuke's super sperm would take a break already. Her poor body. Mommy, mommy. Itachi screamed at the top of his lungs as he came running into the main bedroom. He had a scroll in hand and one of his socks was missing. Karen rolled her eyes. Typical. Itachi always seemed to lose things. Yes. Karen asked as she watched her youngest son jump up and down excitedly. Itachi was very energetic when they were alone, but he always turned into a very quiet, withdrawn and shy boy around others. It worried her from time to time, what if he never fit in? What if he struggled to make friends at the academy one day? What worried her the most, though, was if his name would become a reason for bullying. One of Uncle Naruto's weird masked guys delivered this, Itachi announced as he shoved the scroll under Karen's nose. Oh, Karen exhaled, her eyes narrowing. Masked guys, that meant Umbu. Karen had already been placed on maternity leave since it was dangerous for a pregnant woman to be out in the field and in line of danger, so a scroll delivered by the Umbu was not expected. Because that scroll could only contain one thing, a top-secret mission. Secret enough that Naruto wouldn't even dare to speak to her himself about it, because people could overhear. Is it for Daddy? Karen asked. It was a logical question, since she was on leave and all. No, Itachi replied, your name's on it. Karen frowned. Naruto wouldn't have given her a mission unless she really was the only one who could do it. So it was big and very very secret. And the Umbu was stupid enough to give the scroll to a child. Which probably meant the scroll was sealed very well or written in code. Okay, Karen sighed, hold on to it for a second. I need to finish feeding your sister. Once Karen finished feeding and burping Mikoto, she put the baby in her crib and took the scroll from Itachi. Itachi knew that scrolls from the Umbu was secret, since Sasuke had been part of the Umbu for several years, so he left the room to go play outside. Karen released the seal on the scroll and opened it. She scanned over the writing and sighed in frustration. It was written in code. She reread the strange combination of numbers and letters, trying to find a clue to how she should approach decoding the message. Naruto would have left the clue for her, because this was not something she could take to the Konoha cryptanalysis team. After rereading it twice more, Karen's eyes halted at a combination of letters that formed a word. Mind. Karen frowned, trying to figure out how that would help her solve the code. Something with mind, and then it hit her. Karen smirked as she headed to the study. Naruto had used the classic, page number and line reference code and the book he had chosen was Mind Matters. Funny, since the book was written by his wife. But as Karen pulled the book off the bookshelf, she couldn't help but feel that Naruto had chosen this book for a reason. Not because it was written by Ino, but because this mission involved her. Did Naruto know something about the transfer she did not? Determined, Karen sat down at the desk, the scroll and book open and ready. She had to quickly decipher the message to get on with the mission and possibly finding out how Ino came into the picture. Sarutobi Konohamaru stood quietly under the gates of Konoha, his arms crossed and eyes closed. It was early morning and his team had been assigned a mission. They had agreed to meet at the gates, but he was the first to arrive and none of the others had turned up yet. "Good morning, Konohamaru," a voice interrupted the silence. Konohamaru opened his eyes, surprised to see that Uzumaki Kaguya was the first of the students to arrive. She had been assigned to the mission the last minute upon Konohamaru's request. He felt a three-man team would not be able to pull the mission off. "Hey kid," Konohamaru greeted with a grin. Kaguya returned the grin. As her godfather, Kaguya had always been close to Konohamaru and it had been a long time since she saw him last. What's the Hokage's kid doing here?" Another voice interrupted. Konohamaru and Kaguya turned to face the newcomer. "My name is not Hokage's kid, Nara Ryuji." Kaguya huffed, annoyed. Ryuji laughed and poked her forehead. At 16, Ryuji was just newly promoted to Chunin and was a distant cousin of Shikamaru. Like other Nara men, Ryuji wore his hair in a high ponytail and had a goatee on his chin. The only distinctive difference he had from his Nara relatives was his hair, which was blonde like his mother's. "Kaguya will be joining us on our mission," Konohamaru stated, watching bemused as Ryuji continued to poke Kaguya, much to her annoyance. "Really?" Ryuji's eyes lit up. "So we can do the Ino Shikacho formation? That would be so cool." Konohamaru rolled his eyes, while Kaguya just smiled. She had worked with Team Konohamaru before, since she had inherited the Yamanaka clan's abilities and Ryuji and his teammate, Shiza were from the Nara and Akimichi clans respectively. It was logical that they worked together. However, she had not been assigned to their team when she graduated because of their age difference. Ryuji and Shiza were 3 years older than her and therefore they had already been assigned a team. And there were no members of their clans her age, older and younger, yes, but unfortunately none born the same year she was. She often joked that it was a bad year for the Nara and Akimichi clans. Sometimes she wished she could swap teams. She loved Sasuke and her teammates. Okay, maybe Might Wataru was a bit annoying, but Kaguya sometimes looked at her mother and Shikamaru, as well as other members of the 3 clans and felt jealous. She wanted those bonds too. Kaguya was snapped out of her deep thoughts when Shiza arrived. Shiza was short and plump with lilac-colored hair cut into a bob and dark eyes. She did not have facial markings on her cheeks like others in her clan, rather she had red markings accenting her eyes. She smiled when she spotted Kaguya. "Thank goodness you're here," Shiza said, "these boys drive me insane." "What's that supposed to mean, Shiza?" Ryuji grunted. "It means you're a royal pain in the ass," Shiza retorted, her hands on her hips. "You're incredibly lazy and bore the hell out of me. At least with Kaguya here I'll have something to talk about." "Like what?" "Fatty foods." Ryuji asked with a snort. Shiza narrowed her eyes dangerously and clobbered him over the head. "Now you two," Konohamaru scolded, although his eyes were sparkling with humor, "stop it. We have a mission and teamwork is important." "Now you sound like Kana." Ryuji moaned. "She's always muttering about teamwork." "Of course she is," Shiza snorted. "She's Hatake Kakashi's daughter, you blithering idiot." Konohamaru sighed. These two were never going to change. Kaguya just laughed at the scene before her. She had witnessed it countless times before, but their bickering never got old. Noticing that time was getting ahead of them, Konohamaru cleared his throat, immediately causing the bickering to cease. Shiza and Ryuji turned to face him, both red in the face. "Good, glad that still gets your attention," Konohamaru said. "I will now explain the details of our mission as well as our battle strategy if we are attacked." "Yes, Ryuji, the Ino Shikacho formation is part of the strategy, so stop hopping so excitedly." Shiza chuckled under her breath as Ryuji stopped hopping and blushed. She never quite understood how such a lazy idiot could have so much energy at the same time. When he was overly excited, it reminded her of their former teammate. Shiza sighed and shook her head. No, she was not going to think about that right now. Once Kano Amaru explained the mission, the team was ready to depart. While Shiza and Kaguya exchanged pleasantries while traveling, Kano Amaru and Ryuji agreed on a sparring challenge once the mission was over, although Ryuji tried to worm his way out of it at first. As Konoha faded behind them, Kaguya could not help but get the feeling that the mission was going to be fantastic. Naruto did not trust his own office. It was very possible that it was wired and that the High Council was listening in or watching him. He had to be very careful with what he did and what he shared, because they could not know that he was onto them. So when he decided to talk to the messenger who had revealed the truth to him, he told him to meet him at the Nara estate instead. It was not a place likely to be tapped and Shikamaru had offered the place to Naruto to use to his liking. What will happen to me, sir? The messenger asked nervously after Naruto told him to sit down. They were in the basement, a secret room that only the Narazan now he knew about. Well, you will have to be tried for treason, Naruto stated, noticing the poor man stiffening in response. Naruto sighed. However, since you decided to turn yourself in and tell the truth, you will be shown some leniency. But you still have to be tried, and you might still be sent to prison. But your sentence might be lowered. I see, the messenger mumbled. I suppose I can live with that. What do you need from me today? Information, Naruto replied. Tell me as much as you can. Are they threatening you? The messenger nodded. Naruto's eyes narrowed. What exactly did they threaten you with? Naruto asked. My wife's safety, sir. And my children's future as ninja. That is not their decision, nor part of their power, do you understand? Of course, sir. I know that you always have the final say when it comes to retiring ninja, but they made a convincing argument. And they could easily kill my wife, they are all ninja themselves. Not for much longer, Naruto grumbled bitterly. His fists tightened. The more he learned about his supposedly loyal High Council, the more disgusted he became. He was certain that one or two on the council were running the whole operation and they would suffer the most severe punishment. Maybe even execution, if the situation calls for it. Because from what the messenger said, these people have killed. And murderers were not given any leniency. What letters did they intercept? Naruto changed the subject. Quite a variety, sir, the messenger responded. Mostly those regarding alliances and the safety of our village. Like the ones you sent to Lady Shizuka and Nadeshiko village. They were discussing the future of the prisoner Jugo. The council deems him unstable and a danger to the village. You can just say they think he is a monster, Naruto muttered. The messenger looked down, ashamed. What else? Have they intercepted any that go to Suna? Yes, sir. Bloody bastards. Is the Hyuga elders aware of the council's corruption? I do not know, sir. Should they? Naruto's eyes narrowed again. I do not know. The Hyuga elders and I have never seen eye to eye, so it is possible they are in on it too. You know nothing about the Hyuga clan. The messenger shook his head. Naruto made a mental note to arrange a meeting with the Hyuga elders as well. He didn't trust them, he never had. They refused to abolish the cursed seal. Hinata had made it possible to be used less than in the past, but it had not been eradicated from tradition completely. The Hyuga elders refused to let Hinata move to Suna as well. It was starting to grate on his nerves, and as Shikamaru constantly warned him, it could lead to a war between Konoha and Suna. What about to the other nations? Naruto asked. The council are wary of the other nations, the messenger admitted, and because of that they made sure all letters were delivered. They did not want them to become suspicious of their movements. It could ignite a war. All of this can start a war, Naruto barked. This has to stop, and before it reaches the ears of the other nations. We may be at peace and have an alliance, but conflict is still there. I know, sir. Naruto sighed and rubbed his temple. All his life he had dreamed of becoming Hokage. He had wished to be acknowledged, to be treasured and accepted by the village. He had all of that, he had the power, the respect, and the love. But with this job came great responsibility, and sometimes he felt like he couldn't handle it. How on earth did his father do it, or the third before him? Heck, how on earth did Senju Hashirama pull it off right at the beginning, where it was all bad blood and animosity? And just as it felt like he had lost all hope, an idea suddenly hit him. The High Council were, in essence, a bunch of cowards. There was one thing they always openly opposed about him because they feared it. They feared it more than they feared him. Naruto grinned. It was time to find Kurama. It was not her first time visiting this particular part of the shopping district. Karen stood arms crossed in front of the small house that served as a store as well as a home. It was eerily quiet, which she had not expected. The owner of the house barely left, at least according to Naruto's report on the mission scroll. With a sigh, Karen pressed her ear against the door, listening intently while also trying to pick up any hints of chakra. Nothing. The house was empty. Frowning, thinking this was far too easy, Karen jumped up onto the roof and moved to the back. Behind the house, tucked between the other buildings was a small garden. It was tiny, barely big enough to allow the growth of a tree, but it was big enough to grow some small plants. Karen checked for any threats or curious eyes, then jumped down into the garden. The smell of rosemary infiltrated her senses. Karen's eyes landed on the plant. It was the only plant she recognized in the whole garden. The rest all looked like exotic shrubs that should belong in a tropical forest. Karen leaned closer to a plant bearing dark purple and green leaves and gently touched it. How on earth did someone ever manage to grow these strange plants in such a small space? Karen made a mental note to mention this in her report to Naruto. Karen plucked a leaf from the plant and tucked it into her weapons pouch. A botanist might be able to tell her the plant's name and origin. Karen moved to the glass door that led into the house. She peered inside, once again checking for any signs of life. None. This was way too easy and it was making her nervous. Still, Karen swallowed the unease and checked if the door was unlocked. It was. She stepped inside and the smell of lavender bombarded her. First the rosemary, now lavender. Karen scanned her surroundings. She was in the bedroom, the only one judging by the size of the house. And it was filthy. The bed was unmade, clothes were strewn all over the floor and the walls were covered in marking, scratches and writing. Karen frowned and stepped closer to the wall on her right. She lifted her arm and traced her fingers over some writing, trying to make sense of it. The mind. Infiltrate. Kaze Kage. Beasts. Karen's fingers froze over the word Kaze Kage. What did Gaara have to do with this? No, wait. It might not refer to him, but one of the previous Kaze Kage. Karen moved along the wall, reading more of the strange disjointed words and sentences, hoping to be able to find a link. Karen moved around the room. There were so many strange things carved into the walls. And not just words, pictures as well. Mostly diagrams which she could not understand because almost none of them had a key or any labels. These diagrams were clearly drawn to only make sense to the person who drew them. Karen was now on the other side of the room and the wall before her was empty. No scribbles, words or diagrams were present. The wall was bare, except for one painting. She lifted her gaze to see what the portrait featured and gasped. Karen closed her eyes and opened them again, as if trying to discern if it was a trick, but the portrait remained the same. "I see you found my most treasured possession," a voice hissed. Karen spun around and came face to face with the blank white eyes characteristic to a member of the Hyuga clan. Karen frowned. How on earth did Astra come in without her noticing? How is this possible? Karen asked, her hand slowly creeping to her weapons pouch in case she had to defend herself. Astra smiled wickedly. What exactly are you referring to? The fact that I can evade your unmatched sensory skills, or the fact that I have a portrait of the Hokage hanging in my room? Both. You know, Astra began as she slipped inside the room and closed the door behind her. I liked you back where I come from. You were known as Uzumaki Karen, cousin of the Hokage. And you were worshipped. Karen narrowed her eyes. What do you mean, where I come from? I thought that was obvious by now, Astra pointed out. A different dimension. Karen attempted to guess. Astra's smile widened as she moved around the room, Karen also moving to keep her in sight. Astra stood by the door leading to the garden now, her gaze focused on Karen and her feral smile still in place. Very good, Astra hummed, you learned something from that blonde bitch. Or should I say bitches, since there's two of them now. Karen's eyes flickered to the painting again. That's Hinata with Naruto, isn't it? Yes, Astra replied as she locked the glass door. Karen pulled out a kunai, knowing that things might get ugly now. Uzumaki Hinata, the bravest woman that ever lived. She gave her life to save Konoha. Where you come from? Karen asked. Astra nodded her head and sat down in an old and withered armchair that sat in front of the window. Karen narrowed her eyes, kunai still in hand. What are you doing here? And who is that child with them in the portrait? Astra smirked as she checked her nails, it almost seemed that the conversation was boring her. Isn't it obvious? Karen stepped forward and lifted her kunai. Answer me. You know the answer, Astra whispered. You just don't want to face the truth. Fine, Karen hissed, it's you. You're the child with them. But that still doesn't answer my first question. Astra sighed, but did not say anything. I'll force the answer out if I have to, Karen warned. Astra threw her head back in laughter, but her laugh was cold and bitter. Are you going to capture me, Karen? Hand me over to Baka so that he can torture me? Are you going to have that blonde bimbo look into my mind? Astra asked. If you insult Ino one more time, Karen began to warn. What? Astra sneered. What will you do, Karen? Karen hesitated. She wanted to grab the woman before her and knock her unconscious, take her to Naruto, but something wasn't right. Astra had made it very easy for Karen to infiltrate her house. And how on earth did Astra manage to hide her chakra that Karen could not sense her at all? Because Astra was right, Karen's sensory skills were unmatched, not even Binako had the same level of sight as she did. And Astra was very calm for someone who has found a kunoichi sniffing around in her house. No, something was very wrong. And then it hit her. Karen blinked, her vision suddenly going blurry. She stumbled forward, grabbing onto the bed's post for support. The kunai slipped from her grasp and clattered loudly on the wooden floor. Karen tried to regain her balance, but the world was spinning wildly around her. What have you done to me? Karen demanded angrily. Oh, just a little concoction of mine, Astra hummed. It's a herbal mixture straight from my garden. It won't kill you, just put you to sleep. Karen frowned. But that's impossible, how on earth did Astra get it into her system? They had not stepped near each other, not crossed blades. I burn it, Astra stated, as if she knew what Karen was thinking. Every night I burn it in my room, just in case someone wants to come snooping. Karen snorted. Then will it not affect you too? Ah, Astra laughed as she stood up and approached Karen. That's the beauty of it. I'm immune. Karen collapsed on her knees, fighting the urge to fall asleep. No, she had to stay awake. She had to capture this woman now. Karen looked up into Astra's eyes. Who are you? I thought you figured that out by now, Astra laughed. And Karen. And with that, everything went black. Chapter 31, Human Nature. In the dark, abandoned back alleys of Mabushi, a group of men laughed as they threw a woman to the ground. She cried out in pain, but that only made the drunk men laugh harder. She tried calling for help, but no one could hear her. What should we do with her? One of the men asked. Don't know, another slurred. The men chuckled darkly as they looked down at the terrified woman before them. She was beautiful, with pale skin and silver hair. Her figure was curvy, which added to her appeal. And the way she screamed, it just made the men more excited at the prospect of breaking her. Please, just let me go, the woman begged. I won't report it. The men ignored her as they glanced at each other, trying to figure out who was going to have a piece of her first. The taller of the three decided to take action as he kneeled before the woman and grabbed her by her hair. She yelped, but once again they just found her pain humorous. Tears started to roll down the woman's cheeks. She knew she was doomed and she felt pathetic for not being able to defend herself. If it had been only one man she knew she would have been able to fight and run, but with three? It's impossible. You're so cute, the tall man sneered as he caressed her cheek. The woman cringed and closed her eyes, giving in to her fate. And then someone yawned. The three men froze, suddenly aware that they were no longer alone. The woman slowly opened her eyes, surprised that no one has moved to touch her. The man had let go of her hair and the three men were now nervously looking around them. Fucking humans, a voice muttered. Don't you have any decency? A man stepped from the shadows, his shoulders slouched and his hands tucked into his pockets. His long hair was a brilliant red, but in contrast he had two strands of black hair framing his face. His eyes were a deep vermilion with dark circles around them and his pupils were narrowed slits. His ears were inhumanly pointed and his cheeks were adorned with whisker marks. Who are you? One of the men asked bravely. Who am I? The red-headed man asked. That's a brilliant question and I'm too pissed off to answer you. Just know this is my territory, human. And I don't condone raping or assaulting women. Ever. So you better run while I still feel merciful. The three men glanced at each other and laughed. Merciful? Another asked. What you going to do? Kill us. The redhead's eyes narrowed dangerously and he clicked his tongue. The three men gasped and stepped back, only now realizing that the man before them had very long and sharp canines. This thing, it couldn't be human. What are you? The third man gasped. Like I said, I'm too pissed off to even acknowledge your stupid questions. You have 5 seconds to get out of my sight or I'll be forced to act, the redhead hissed. 1. The men yelped and scurried away, pushing past the redhead and into the night. The woman watched, amazed as her attackers ran for their lives. As soon as they were gone, she turned to face her mysterious rescuer. Thank you, she whispered. She quickly wiped away her tears and stood up. Her tights were ripped and she had dropped her groceries when the men cornered her just outside the convenience store. She sighed. She'd have to go back and see if it was still there. This is yours, right? The redhead asked as he held up a plastic bag. The woman's eyes widened. Yes, thank you. She exclaimed as she took the bag from the stranger. He must have found it on the ground and then heard her pleas for help. She smiled weakly. It was good to know that good men still existed. You shouldn't go out alone this late, the redhead warned. The woman smiled weakly. I don't really have a choice. I work all day, so I can only run errands afterwards. She wasn't sure why she was telling this to a complete stranger, but somehow she felt like she could trust this man, despite his non-human appearance. Your name? The stranger asked. Yoko, the woman replied, surprised he wanted to know. Yoko, huh? Where do you live, Yoko? Yoko blinked, doubt suddenly rising in her mind. Why did he want to know? Was he also planning something? Just because he saved her, didn't mean he had good intentions. He must have noticed her discomfort, because he laughed. Relax, Yoko. I just want to get you home safely. I'll walk you and then I'll be out of your hair, for good. Yoko sighed in relief. Oh. Thank you, mister. She trailed off when she realized he had not introduced himself. He smirked. You may call me Kurama. Karen. Sasuke called out his wife's name when he arrived at home. There was no answer, but Itachi did come running to the front door and jumped into his father's arms. Welcome home, Daddy. He chirped. Sasuke smiled and patted his son's head. He could hear movement in the kitchen, so he headed in that direction with Itachi on his hip, expecting to find Karen preparing dinner. Instead he found Suijutsu filling up his flasks. Where's Karen? Sasuke asked. Suijutsu shrugged. No idea, I don't keep tabs on her. Sasuke rolled his eyes and set Itachi on his feet. Of course Suijutsu never kept tabs on Karen, while Karen always had to know where Suijutsu was and what he was doing. It was the only way she was certain he wasn't doing anything stupid. If you're looking for Mom, Masashi interrupted as he stepped inside, then you're about an hour late. She left for a mission. Masashi held up a note as he said this. Sasuke frowned and snatched the paper from his eldest son's hand. True enough, it was a note from Karen stating she had left on a mission for Naruto. But something wasn't right. Karen was already on maternity leave, so she should not be assigned any missions of any sort. At all. And although Naruto was dense, he wasn't stupid. He knew and understood the risks of pregnant women being in the line of danger. He would never give a mission to a woman on maternity leave. So how come he did? Sasuke scrunched up the note and tossed it into the bin. It was time to talk to his best friend. With the sun slowly setting over the horizon, the nightlife of Mabushi sprang into action. Lamps lit up the streets, while restaurants and bars alike filled up with patrons. Those with a more sinister idea of entertainment headed for the red light district, where the streets were much more flamboyant. On 5th Street in the center of Mabushi, Yoko had just started her evening shift at the bar where she had worked for the past 3 years. Dressed in her usual orange kimono, with her hair tied up and tucked into a white cap, she set to work diligently, ignoring the haunted memories from the previous night that crept into her mind. She had scrubbed herself raw in the shower after she got home, before collapsing in bed and crying herself to sleep. She woke up with a headache and heavy bags under her eyes. She had to cover the dark circles with concealer so that her colleagues and boss wouldn't get worried. Despite her efforts to appear normal, her friend, Risa, noticed. "You look exhausted," Risa pointed out as they both placed plates on trays in the kitchen to take out to customers. "Are you alright?" "I'm fine," Yoko lied. Risa was not convinced, but she did not push for details. Yoko appreciated this about Risa. She never pushed you. All her life, Yoko had been pushed around and forced to do things against her will by her father. 3 years ago she had put her foot down and ran. And she has not looked back ever since. Toshi, the bar owner, suddenly appeared behind the two women, his large figure towering over them. Yoko yelped when she saw him and jumped back, memories of the attack from the previous night still fresh in her mind. Risa and Toshi looked at her, worried. "What's the matter with you?" Toshi asked, a frown on his face. "Nothing, sorry," Yoko muttered. She willed her galloping heart to calm down. Toshi too did not seem convinced, but one stern look from Risa made him decide against questioning Yoko further. Instead he crossed his arms and cleared his throat. "There's someone here to see you." "What, me?" Yoko asked, surprised. Toshi nodded. "Weird-looking bloke. He said you dropped something last night and he came to return it." Yoko's eyes widened. Judging by Toshi's description, it could only be Kurama, but what had she dropped? And how on earth did he know where she worked? Filled with trepidation, Yoko asked Mimi, another waitress, to deliver her orders. She then excused herself to go confront her savior. He was wearing the same clothes and his hair was still tied up in the same hairstyle. In fact, it was hard to believe that they had not seen each other in several hours. All eyes in the bar were on him, but he did not seem bothered by this. "What are you doing here?" Yoko hissed when she reached him. He gave her a toothy grin. "You dropped this." He handed her her purse. Her eyes widened. She hadn't even realized it was missing. "Thanks," she muttered, feeling guilty. He had obviously looked inside for contact details, which is how he knew where she worked. She had freaked out for nothing. "Your hair," Kurama whispered as he reached out and took a strand of her silver hair between his fingers. She froze, the contact unexpected. "You dyed it, right?" "What? How do you know that?" Yoko asked, eyes wide. Not even Risa knew that her current hair color wasn't her natural color. Kurama grinned. "There was an ID from Kyuzagakuer in your purse with a photo of you and your name on it. Your natural color is red." Yoko remained frozen. She had completely forgotten that her ID from Kyuzagakuer was still in her purse. She had told herself countless times to get rid of it, but for some reason she held onto it. Kyuzagakuer held no more value to her and she had buried that part of her life a long time ago. Dyeing her hair had been the first step to burying her past. And now it came back to haunt her. "What makes you so sure?" Yoko asked. "Maybe the red hair was also dye." Kurama chuckled while gently rubbing her hair between his fingers. "Red hair is a common trait for Uzumaki clan members. Tell me, Yoko, are you a ninja?" No, Yoko immediately replied. Because it was true. She wasn't a ninja. She hated the fact that her name was connected to so many high-profile ninja, because it immediately meant people thought she was one too. Kurama smirked. You have no idea who I am, do you? You're Kurama. You saved me and I am grateful. That is all I need to know. Kurama laughed and let go of her hair. I like you. You remind me of a certain blonde-haired, ignorant idiot. Glad you approve, Yoko muttered. I have to get back to work. Thanks for returning my purse. Yoko did not allow him to say goodbye. She was still freaked out that he had discovered her secret and she really did not want him snooping around and discovering why she had run from Kusagakuer and hid her identity. In fact, she didn't want to see him again at all. Because deep down, something told her he was different. And not in a good way. Why did you send Karen on a mission? Sasuke asked the minute he stepped into Naruto's office. Naruto looked up, alarmed. His friend had not knocked, nor even said hello like a proper human being. Instead he burst in and started spouting nonsense. What are you talking about? Naruto asked, confused. Karen left me a note, saying she left for a mission, Sasuke stated. Why on earth would you send a pregnant woman on a mission? Naruto frowned and put down his pen. He was currently in the process of writing Gaara a letter, requesting that he assist in finding Kurama. I did not assign her any missions, Sasuke, Naruto stated calmly. Are you sure you read the note right? Of course I did, you idiot. Sasuke yelled. If she's not on a mission, where the fuck is she? Naruto's eyes widened. Anger was visible on Sasuke's face and Naruto had to admit, things weren't adding up, so his anger was justified. Karen had left a note, stating she was on a mission, but there was no mission to begin with. So where was she? I don't know, Naruto muttered. You don't know? Sasuke screamed. She's nowhere. I looked everywhere. She's gone. With that Sasuke slammed his fists on Naruto's desk, sending paperwork flying. Naruto sat stock still, his eyes still wide. Have you found the mission scroll, perhaps? Naruto asked. That way we might know where she went. Sasuke sighed. No, I didn't bother to look for it. I was angry at you and came straight here. Let's check the house first, Naruto suggested calmly, although deep down he was worried. What if this was the council's doing? What if they knew he was onto them, so they start attacking those he loved? He really needed to get the letter to Gaara as soon as possible. A pair of cold light blue eyes stared down at her, clearly not amused. Karen cringed under the intensity of the gaze, but it did not feel like it was her body that cringed. No, she felt disjointed, almost as if she was there, but at the same time not. I am disappointed in you, the owner of the blue eyes hissed dangerously. Karen looked up into those eyes again and nearly choked when she recognized the person's face. Long blonde hair in a braid, light blue eyes, fair skin, and dressed in a long purple dress, she was instantly recognizable, but at the same time not. Karen wanted to ask her what was going on, she wanted to know why it felt like she had no control of her body, but she could not open her mouth. I'm sorry, Karen felt herself apologize in a small voice, but it wasn't her voice. It sounded nothing like her voice. Sorry isn't good enough, Yamanaka Ino yelled, causing Karen to step backwards and fall over her own feet, landing on her behind. I'm sorry, Karen cried as she wrapped her arms around her. I'm sorry, Aunt Ino. I'm sorry. Ino sneered and moved to a wooden desk behind her and sat down. Karen took this chance to look around, to try and figure out where she was and why she did not sound like herself. And she really wanted to know why Ino, a different Ino to the one she knew, was treating her like the scum of the earth. And why had she called Ino aunt? It was the Hokage's office. Karen could tell just from the shape of the room. The desk was the same one Naruto had chosen when he was elected as Hokage and the view outside the window was exactly like the one she remembered seeing every time she went for a mission debriefing. But what really made it official that it was the Hokage's office was the series of portraits of the Hokage on the left wall. She recognized all the faces, but her blood ran cold when she realized that there weren't just 6 portraits. There were 7. And the seventh face belonged to Ino. An older Ino with absolutely no love on her face. Karen's gaze shifted back to Ino, who was not sitting at the desk and shuffling through some paperwork. She finally found one in particular and threw it at Karen's feet. "See that?" Ino asked. "That's your beloved Aunt Karen's file. She's a criminal, Hashiko. And you allowed her to escape." Karen stared at her own photograph. It was definitely her, but older and with short hair. Her name was not Uchiha Karen, but Uzumaki Karen, and her marital status was divorced. It did not say who she had divorced, but Karen knew it couldn't have been Sasuke. She would never divorce him, not even in other worlds. At least, she could not fathom it. "Do you realize the seriousness of what you have done?" Ino asked as Karen continued to stare at her own profile. "Listen when I speak to you, Hashiko." Karen's head snapped up and she frowned. Hashiko? Who was Hashiko? Was that why she couldn't control her body, because it wasn't actually hers? That explained why her voice was different. She must be inside Hashiko's body, or maybe she was dreaming. But this did not feel like a dream. "I'm sorry," Hashiko apologized again. Karen shivered. It really felt like it was her talking, but at the same time not. It was not a good feeling. Ino sighed and stood up, turning her back to Karen. "When your parents died, I took you in. I taught you many things, including my own techniques. I think of you as my daughter, yet you betray me like this." "I'm sorry," was all Hashiko said again. "I should just give you to Hanabi to brand you with that seal," Ino hissed. "Maybe as a branch family member you'll learn where your priorities should lie." Karen's head snapped up, but Hashiko was the one in control. "No." Ino turned around and narrowed her eyes. "You might be the daughter of Hinata and the rightful heir to the Hyuga family, Hashiko, but that does not mean you are safe from the seal. I can easily arrange Hanabi's son to be the next heir. He is, after all, much easier manipulated than you." Hashiko sobbed quietly as Ino's words stabbed her very being. Slowly, Karen felt Hashiko dragging her body across the floor, slowly crawling to Ino where she stood. Ino looked down at her, disgust evident on her face. Finally, with shaking hands, Hashiko reached out to Ino and grabbed onto her dress. "I'm sorry," Hashiko sobbed. A hiccup escaped in between her sobbing. I'll find her. I'll find Karen and bring her back." Ino pulled her dress away from Hashiko, causing her to fall flat on her face from the sudden force. "As if you can," Ino hissed. "You're just a child." With that, Ino stomped out of the room and slammed the door behind her. Hashiko remained on the floor, her sobbing now loud wails. She rolled over onto her back and stared at the ceiling as tears flowed down her cheeks. "Yes, Aunt Ino," Hashiko cried. "I am a child. But I'm the child of the 6th Hokage. That's got to be worth something." Karen felt her heart break for the strange Hashiko. She still did not understand why she was seeing this, experiencing this strange event, but she knew it couldn't be a dream. And she wished she could comfort the poor child lying abandoned in the Hokage's office. Karen's eyes fluttered open slowly and she grunted when pain shot through her arms. Her vision was blurry as she tried to determine where she was, because just a few seconds before she was still inside Hashiko's body. Where was she now? "Awake yet?" a voice asked. Karen turned her head to the source of the voice and saw a blob of purple. The owner of the voice laughed. "It will take a while for the effects to wear off. You're going to be blind a while longer." "Where am I?" Karen rasped. "Where no one can find you," the voice said. "At least until I want you to be found." The voice was starting to sound familiar, and then the events played through her head like a record. Of course, Astra had drugged her. And how frustrating it was. Karen was a Jonin and she had so easily been tricked and incapacitated. Astra moved closer to Karen and knelt down before her. "Did you enjoy it?" "Enjoy what?" Karen asked. The vision Astra replied as she traced a finger across Karen's cheek. "Did you enjoy seeing your so-called best friend treat poor little Hashiko like a piece of garbage?" Karen's eyes widened. It was you." "Oh yes," Astra hummed as she stood up and moved around the room. Ino taught me many things and mind manipulation was one of the techniques she made sure I excelled at. Karen knew that she had to get out of here and fast. This woman was insane and a danger to the village. She had to warn Naruto. Karen struggled against the chains that bound her arms to the wall, which explained the pain she felt, but it would not budge. "You're Hashiko," Karen whispered, "you're the little girl. But why? Why did you show that to me?" "To make you see the truth, of course. Everyone always fell at that bitch's feet and kissed her ass. But she was no hero, no wise leader that deserved worship. She was cruel, she was evil and she killed my father. But that's not what Ino in this dimension is like," Karen exclaimed. She wanted to continue defending her friend, to explain to Astra that the Ino here was different, but Astra had already moved closer and gagged Karen. She sputtered, but no words could escape her mouth. "Shush," Astra whispered as she tucked a strand of Karen's hair behind her ear. "It doesn't matter." Karen struggled in her chains, hoping to somehow get free, but she felt drained. The chains were rubbing her skin raw and the pain was unbearable. Fear shot through her. The baby. What of the baby? That enough made her stop struggling. She had to keep the baby's safety in mind. Astra laughed and patted Karen's cheek before heading to the door. "Don't worry, Karen. I'll be back. And they will find you. I'll make sure of it. You're my message." Karen attempted to glare at Astra, but it did not quite work since her vision was still blurry. This just caused Astra to laugh more. "I'm not going to kill you," Astra explained. "No, that's too obvious. I'm just going to make them stress for a while. Naruto might be my father, but he really shouldn't meddle in my affairs. I won't harm his precious little Konoha. All I want is Ino." Astra slammed the door behind her when she left. Chapter 32, The Fox. A warm, sandy wind swept through the desert in the land of wind. The sun was sitting high in the sky and baking down on the golden dunes. It was, like any other day, very hot at the Temple of Wind. While the monks were used to the climate, they still felt uncomfortable in the dry heat. Seiji, a recent recruit, was currently undergoing vigorous training, despite the heat. He had begged his teacher to go easy on him, but as usual the senior monk had brushed him off and reminded him that a ninja, especially a ninja monk, never whined or did easy training. Charging head-on, Seiji lifted his arm to punch his teacher, but his move was easily dodged. He gasped when he lost his footing and collapsed on the ground. "Get up," his teacher ordered. With a heavy sigh, Seiji forced his aching legs to stand. He turned around, ready to charge again, but he stopped when he realized his teacher was no longer paying attention. Instead, it seemed like the older man was staring off into the distance, his brows furrowed in concentration. Seiji blinked, surprised. He had never seen his teacher off guard or dazed. It just didn't happen. "Master Shukaku." Seiji called out to him, but his teacher did not respond. The man was standing still, far too still for his liking. Was something wrong? Seiji debated calling for help, but just before he decided to do so, Shukaku snapped out of his daze and his facial expression turned sour. Seiji sighed in relief. Angry Shukaku he was used to and could handle. "What is the matter?" Seiji asked. "Nothing," Shukaku barked. "Training is done for the day. Go shower." And just like that the senior monk stormed off. Seiji felt relief for having been dismissed, but now he was worried. Something was wrong and Shukaku was obviously not in the mood to share. "Are you stalking me?" Yoko asked as she set down a small bottle of warm sake in a cup on the table before the red head that seemed to have grown attached to her. Kurama looked up, his vermilion eyes twinkling with amusement. "No. Really?" Yoko asked as she placed her hands on her hips. It was just past twilight and the bar was slowly beginning to fill up with customers. It was going to be another long night of endless running around. "Yes, really," Kurama hummed as he poured himself a drink. "I just like the sake here, honest." Yoko gave him a skeptical look, because honestly she did not think it was the sake that kept him coming back. It wasn't the food either, because not once in the 3 weeks that have passed since her attack had he ordered even a morsel. "Would you like something to eat?" Yoko asked. "Not today, was his reply. Yoko rolled her eyes. It was the same answer he had given her the day before, and the day before that. Do you even eat? Yoko asked, her gaze shifting to his pointed ears. She had her theories behind his strange appearance, but none were concrete. She highly doubted elves actually existed. Kurama grinned widely as he took a sip of the sake. Delicious. And no, I don't actually eat. You're not human, are you? Yoko asked. Kurama glanced at her, the grin on his face widening. A shiver ran down Yoko's spine at the intensity of the gaze he gave her. That obviously proved it, he wasn't human. Scared? He questioned just before taking another sip of his drink. No, Yoko said defiantly. If you were going to eat me, you would have done so already. Kurama threw his head back in laughter. Yoko chuckled. Talking to him was easy, even now that he had proved her theory of his humanity. She knew she was supposed to be frightened, but she couldn't bring herself to see him as a bad person. Dangerous? Yes. Evil and potentially planning to murder her? No. Yoko, order for table 7. Toshi's voice boomed from the kitchen. Yoko sighed. I better get back to work, Yoko muttered. Enjoy your sake. Kurama's gaze followed Yoko as she walked to the kitchen. At first he had not understood his fascination with her, but the more he got to know her, the more he realized just why exactly he felt comfortable with a human for the first time in a very long time. When he had saved her 3 weeks prior, he had merely sensed her negative emotions and followed it. The scene he found disgusted him, but after he chased the silly drunk man away he had not planned to see her again. Humans were fragile and he did not wish to grow attached. And then he discovered she was an Uzumaki. He had berated himself for not noticing earlier. Her chakra should have made her identity obvious, but he had looked past it. But the more he spent time around her, the more he realized how much her chakra resembled the warm chakra that Naruto also had. And then there's the fact that his inhuman appearance did not scare her off. Everyone in the bar was glaring at him, or cowering away in fear. Yoko, on the other hand, talked to him often and showed no sign of fear or disgust. And she was kind of cute too. Not that he would ever admit that out loud. From the corner of his eye, Kurama noticed someone sit down opposite him. He frowned, wondering who would dare approach him, but when he turned to greet the newcomer he froze. A pair of cold yellow eyes stared at him. Well, Kurama snorted as he lifted his cup to his lips. This is new. The monk actually came to visit me. Shut up, the newcomer hissed, his voice low. I'm not here by choice. And truthfully, I'd rather die choking on my own vomit than talk to you, you stinking fox. Kurama rolled his eyes. What are you doing in my territory? Delivering a message, because your stupid Jinchuriki can't do it himself. Watch your tongue, Shikaku. If I recall, you're quite attached to your former Jinchuriki as well. Because it's convenient, Shikaku retorted. That is all. I have no sentimental attachment to the boy. Kurama hummed. He lifted his sake bottle. Drink. Fuck yes. Kurama just rolled his eyes again and motioned for Yoko to bring him another cup. She seemed surprised by the newcomer, but one look at his black sclera, black tattoos and pointy ears gave her all the answers she needed. He was like Kurama, not human, and clearly not as friendly either, judging by the permanent scowl on his face. She knew from the tension between the two that she shouldn't bother them, at least not for a while. So she refilled their sake bottle as well, then disappeared into the kitchen to deliver another table's order. So, Kurama restarted the conversation, a message, eh? Since when are you a messenger? I'm not, Shikaku huffed. But your little blonde is looking for you. And you have your mental walls up again, which means Gaara couldn't contact you. Nor could I for that matter. Why didn't you send a messenger bird? You would have given the thing one look, notice it is from me and eat it to piss me off. Kurama laughed. True, I probably would have. Why didn't you send your usual errand girl, then? Madatabi refuses to do me any more favors, as she put it, Shikaku explained. Cats. They never do what you want them to. I could have told you that. I'm surprised she allowed you to toss her around for so long. How is she, by the way? Still working for Kumogakuer? I'll never understand why she chose to pledge her loyalty to the very people that imprisoned her. Her Jinchuriki is dead. She has no ties to that place. The two Biju sat in silence, sipping their drinks, thinking about their comrade who had integrated herself among human society so differently compared to them. They served no one, nor did they allow anyone to control them. Madatabi, however, had pledged her loyalty to the Raikage and had received a foreign protector, as if she was a ninja from their village. It was ridiculous. Can I leave and safely say the message has been delivered? Shikaku broke the silence. Because I am tired of looking at your ugly face. I didn't want to see your ugly mug either, raccoon. But yes, message delivered. I'm assuming Naruto wants me in Konoha. Yes. Something about an invasion or something. I don't know, Gaara was being cryptic. You know, Kurama began, I've always thought it was weird how our former Jinchuriki are best friends, but we hate each other's guts. Shikaku drained his drink and slammed the cup on the table, causing it to crack. Several humans turned to look at them, disapproval clear on their faces. I don't think it's weird, at all, Shikaku muttered. He stood up and tossed some coins on the table to pay for his drink. Later, Fox. Have fun with your human pet. Shikaku nodded in the direction of the bar, where Yoko was filling sake bottles. Kurama's eyes narrowed. She's not my pet. Don't ever call her that again, Shikaku. Or I'll rip that silly little tail of yours right off. Shikaku smirked. Ah, did the big bad fox fall in love with a human? It came out of nowhere. A whip of red chakra grabbed Shikaku's ankle and threw him against a wall, causing everyone in the bar to halt. Several people screamed and scurried away from the fight, while Toshi stomped over to the two Biju to stop them from destroying his property. Yoko, however, stopped him, knowing he would only get hurt if he got closer. Don't, she warned, they are not normal. I've had to kick out ninja before, Toshi hissed. I don't think they are normal ninja, Toshi, Yoko whispered, her gaze shifting to the red chakra that still clutched onto Shikaku's ankle. The raccoon had already recovered from the attack and a feral grin was plastered on his face. Kurama, 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 Shikaku tooted. His eyes landed on Yoko, who was still standing with Toshi. It's faint, but I can sense a strong life force flowing through that girl's system. Another Uzumaki? I'd say you've developed a fetish. Yoko felt a shiver run down her spine at Shikaku's words. She glanced at Kurama. He was still sitting, sake cup in hand, but his glare was menacing and the red chakra was definitely coming from him. She had known he might have been a ninja, or something along those lines because he knew about the Uzumaki clan. But, just how well did he know her clan? What I do with my life is none of your business, you fat dog, Kurama hissed. Get out. Before I really do rip that pathetic tail of yours off. Shikaku just cackled wildly, but did as Kurama ordered. With a bow and a dirty look shot towards Yoko, he exited the bar. Kurama drowned his last drink, stood and handed several notes to Toshi. It was far more than what he was supposed to pay, but Shikaku's impact with the wall had left a nasty crack and broken 2 tables. The extra money was to pay for repairs. Kurama might not care much about humans, but he was a decent being and knew when to show respect. I won't come here again, Kurama stated as Toshi shakily took the money. Kurama glanced at Yoko and smiled sadly. Sorry. In a flash of red, he was gone. Yoko stared at the spot where he stood, flabbergasted. She was very confused, because the fight had obviously been about her. And she wasn't sure what to think of it. Why did Kurama defend her? They barely knew each other and he wasn't even human. Was it because she was an Uzumaki? And if it was, why would her heritage matter? 3 weeks ago she had told herself not to get involved with him. And then he wandered back into the bar and straight into her life. They had shared several stories, none of significance, but personal nonetheless. He had made her laugh, made her feel safe. And she wanted to get to know him better. Especially since he seemed to know so much about her clan. With newfound determination, Yoko pulled off her apron and tossed it over a chair. She quickly grabbed her things from the storeroom and made a dash for the door, only to be intercepted by Toshi and Risa. "Where are you going?" they asked in unison. "After him," Yoko stated. No you're not," Risa said. "Yoko, he's dangerous. Did you see what he did?" Yoko sighed. She really did not have time for this. "Look, he and his friend knows about me. They know about my clan. They were fighting about me. I want to know what is going on." "Your clan?" Toshi asked, confused. Yoko shook her head. She had not told them her true name or of her past, and she didn't have time to do so now. "How do you know they were fighting about you?" Risa asked. "Because they were talking about the Uzumaki clan. And I'm the only Uzumaki in this bar," Yoko exclaimed, annoyed. Toshi and Risa blinked, surprised by her sudden outburst. Yoko took this opportunity to push past them. They called out to her, but she ignored them and kept running. She was going to get to the bottom of this. She could see him walking in the distance, and she urged her legs to run faster to catch up. He was heading in the direction of the gate, which meant he was leaving. But why? Would he seriously leave Mabushi to stay away from her? Determined, Yoko inhaled deeply in preparation to yell. "Wait!" He did not stop, but she did notice she was catching up with him, which meant he had slowed down. She smiled gratefully. He had heard her, and he was not going to run away and leave her without answers. When she was finally next to him, she could walk, but she was out of breath from the running. "Humans, you always breathe funny after doing rigorous activities," Kurama muttered. "Sorry for being human," Yoko retorted, but she was smiling. She knew he did not mean it in an offensive manner. He often spoke of a blonde, obviously human, and from the tone of his voice, he seemed fond of the person. She wondered who exactly the person was. "Are you leaving?" Yoko asked. "Yes. I'm coming with you." Kurama chuckled. "Are you now?" "I'm going to Konoha. Are you sure you want to go there?" Yoko understood his question. She had never told him why she changed her name, why she ran from her own village and clan, but she knew he had some theories. And she knew he understood her reluctance to return to her old life. Konoha was home to several Uzumaki clan members, always had been because of the relation to the Senju clan. If she were to go to Konoha with him, she would be exposed to her old life. Yet, she didn't seem to care. She just wanted to the truth about why the man next to her knew so much, and a part of her wanted to stay with him. He was different from other men she knew, and that excited her. The fact that he wasn't human did not bother her at all. Kurama chuckled again. "Looks like you've made up your mind." "How do you know that?" Yoko asked, genuinely curious. "I can sense your emotions, Yoko." A blush formed on her cheeks at that revelation. Did that mean he could also sense when she felt surges of affection towards him? Did he know she found him attractive? She got her answer when he smirked. And it just made her blush worse. With 37-year-old Ino. Ino stepped into the darkness, the water surrounding her feet splashing as she moved. A menacing aura surrounded her, followed by a loud growl that did sound welcoming at all. Ino ignored it and refused to show any fear or discomfort. This was not her first time using mind transfer on Naruto, albeit the first time on this version of him, but the inner chamber where the fox was sealed always sent shivers down her spine. It wasn't a nice place to be, not for anyone, the Kyuubi included. "You know," she said, "if you cooperated and just did as Naruto asked, this could have been avoided." A pair of vermilion eyes narrowed dangerously. "Silence, woman. I don't take orders or requests from humans." Ino cocked her head to the side. "Really, Kurama?" The Kyuubi roared as he jumped up and pressed his large head against the railing that sealed him and kept him separate from the woman before him. "How do you know my name?" he hissed. Ino smiled. "I thought you could hear and see everything that Naruto experiences." The beast stared at her coldly, then started laughing uncontrollably. "You might have convinced the humans that you come from another dimension, but I'm not that stupid," Kurama snorted. "On the contrary, it would appear you are even more stupid than the humans," Ino concluded. Kurama continued to glare at her. She sighed and stepped closer, pressing herself against the railings, surprising the beast and making him back away. Why had she come closer? Did she not fear him? Did she not see him and want to run away with disgust? He stared wide-eyed as she reached out to him, as if she wanted to touch him. What are your intentions? Kurama asked. It has been a long time, old friend, Ino whispered. Far too long. And seeing you like this, it pains me. What do you mean, old friend? Kurama roared. Ino did not answer him, instead she looked him in the eyes and smiled. Genuinely smiled. No fear, no disgust, no disrespect. Just happiness, fondness, unconditional love. And it baffled him. Frightened him even. Only one person had ever looked at him like that, and he was dead. I am from a different dimension, Kurama, Ino replied. Where I come from, the Biju have been freed on the condition that they harm no humans or the Alliance. Impossible, was the curt snort. Ino rolled her eyes. Right now, perhaps, yes. But things are different in my dimension. It's the future and Naruto proposed your release. He fought for all 9 of you, and won. I can still remember the day you were extracted from him. He survived? Kurama asked, his curiosity now piqued. It made sense, Kushina had survived his extraction, so in theory, Naruto should be able to as well. Yes. He was hospitalized for a while, but he recovered quickly, Ino replied. But you stayed. You did not leave the village immediately. You became part of the family, the brother Naruto never had. And strangely, we became friends too. You're insane. Ino chuckled. Perhaps, but I am speaking the truth. You know why I am here, please Kurama. Help me. I must go back, I do not belong here. My child doesn't belong here. And I fear the longer I delay, my unborn child could die. And why should I care? Kurama asked. He moved closer again, lowering his body so he could be on the same level as the woman. I won't gain anything from it. Besides, whoever said I believe you? Minato, Ino whispered, shocking the Biju. He jumped back again, his teeth bared. How dare you mention that name in front of me? He roared, his chakra spiking. This woman was treading dangerous waters and he was starting to get annoyed. Not the fourth, idiot, Ino muttered as she stepped back, releasing herself from the tight grip she had on the railings. Your godson. Kurama did not say a word in return, the shock obviously rendering him speechless. Ino smiled. Yes, I named you my second child's godfather. And no, it wasn't Naruto's idea, it was mine, Ino explained. If you won't do this for Naruto, or me, do it for the boy who loves you unconditionally. You may have never met him, but he knows you. He adores you, he accepts you. And that's what you yearn for deep down, isn't it? Acceptance. Silence. Ino knew she had struck a nerve. All the Biju felt the same, betrayed, abused and used. They were all manipulated and thrown about like weapons by humans. Nobody ever bothered to get to know them, to talk to them, to learn about them and come to understand that they were more than chakra monsters. They were living beings too, they also had feelings and dreams. They also had rights to freedom, but humans took that away from them, controlled them, threw them into prisons. Why should I do it for a boy I will never meet? Kurama finally broke the silence. Whoever said you'll never meet? Perhaps, one day, there will be a Minato in this dimension too. But only if you help me set things right. Kurama stared at Ino for several minutes, his vermilion eyes cutting right through her. She stared back, completely unfazed by his intense gaze. Finally he sighed. You want me to contact the raccoon's former Jinchuriki, right? Yes. What exactly do I say? Ino smirked. Just one word will do, I just need his attention. I'll take it from there. Kurama looked bewildered, but he did not argue. Ino stepped closer again and motioned for him to lean closer. He wasn't sure why she was going to whisper the word to him, it wasn't like anyone could hear them, but he decided to amuse her anyway. Humans were so silly sometimes. He leaned closer, expecting her to say some large, intricate word that was meant to be a code or something. Psychic. It wasn't what he expected. The large gates of Konoha creaked open, a small group of people, including the Hokage, standing behind it. Naruto and two toads, one sitting on the other, moved forward and turned to face the people who had come to see them off. Sakura glanced at Ino, surprised that the blonde had decided to come and see Naruto off. In fact, she was really starting to wonder what the blonde was up to. She was always with Naruto and she carried herself differently. She was much more confident and exuded this aura of control. It was bizarre. But what confused Sakura the most was the longing smile she had on her face. She was staring at Naruto, her gaze shifting to Lord Fukakazaku every now and then. It didn't make sense. She looked at them like she's known them all her life. Naruto, of course, she had known all her life, but Lord Fukakazaku? They had only just met. Then, let us go, Lord Fukakazaku said from where he was perched on another toad. He turned to Naruto. Naruto boy, say your goodbyes. I'm off. Naruto said excitedly, his blue eyes sparkling. He was looking forward to becoming stronger. Shikamaru, I'm counting on you with the code. Don't worry about us, Shikamaru replied. Tsunade nodded. I will contact you the moment the results of the autopsy and interrogations are in. I will leave the messenger toad behind, Lord Fukakazaku stated. If there's anything, give it to him. Yes sir, was Tsunade's professional response. Sakura stepped in. Naruto, good luck. Naruto nodded, a grin forming on his face. His gaze shifted to Ino, and frowned when he realized she was staring at him. He waved his hand in front of her face, snapping her out of her stupor. She laughed and threw her arms around him, shocking everyone present. Of course, Tsunade and Shikamaru knew about their relationship, but neither of them had been aware they were intimate, in any way. Sakura stared, flabbergasted, her shock increasing when Naruto returned Ino's embrace. You got what you need? Naruto asked when he pulled away, however his hands remained on her waist. Don't worry, Ino grinned, the Kyuubi told me I have Gaara's attention. Awesome, Naruto grinned. Why were you staring at me and the old toad? Ino smiled. It's a nostalgic sight, that is all. We used to fight side by side, you and me, and Lord Fukakazaku on your shoulder. Naruto frowned, obviously not understanding why the old toad would be on his shoulder. He opened his mouth to ask, but Ino shook her head and placed her finger on his lips. Don't ask. You'll learn why while training, Ino stated. Naruto's eyes lit up. So the other me did this training too? Naruto asked. Ino nodded. Do I master it? Naruto asked in a whisper. Ino rolled her eyes. What do you think? She asked. Okay, that was a stupid question, Naruto laughed. What will you be doing while I'm away? As soon as I have convinced Tsunade to allow me to leave, I'm off to Suna, Ino replied. It's time Gaara and I put our plan into action. Naruto nodded. All right, good luck. He turned to Lord Fukakazaku. Let's go. The blonde turned and walked out the gate, only to stop several steps ahead. He turned around, cheeky smile on his face. By the way, where's Mount Miyabuku? Sakura, despite still being distracted by watching Naruto and Ino whispering to each other, slapped her forehead. Can we really trust this guy? It takes a month to get there on foot, Lord Fukakazaku explained. It's also called the Maze Mountain. If you don't know the secret route you won't be able to get there. Naruto's shoulders sagged. It's hard just to get there. Lord Fukakazaku pulled out a scroll. Naruto boy, you already have a contract with us toads. There's no need to worry. Lord Fukakazaku unrolled the scroll, it suddenly popping into a much bigger one with familiar names written on it in blood. Naruto immediately recognized it and gaped as he pointed at it. Lord Fukakazaku smirked and turned his head to face Tsunade. Well then, I'll be borrowing this boy. With that he tapped the scroll, causing smoke to rise from it. Tsunade bowed her head. Please take care of him. Naruto stared, not quite sure what was going on. Just as he was about to ask, he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Sakura did a double take. He disappeared. Tsunade crossed her arms and nodded. It's a reverse summoning. Good luck on your side too. Lord Fukazaku bid his farewell, did the hand seals for a reverse summoning and vanished the same way Naruto did. Tsunade immediately turned to return to her office. Alright, let's work hard to find all the information Jiraiya left for us. Roger, was Shikamaru's response as he too left, hands in pockets. Only Sakura and Ino remained. Sakura immediately turned to Ino, her gaze determined. The two of them had pushed aside their differences in the past, having realized their childhood feud was silly, so Sakura easily considered Ino to be a friend. But Ino was acting strange, had been for a while, and Sakura wanted to get to the bottom of it. Ino, can we talk? Sakura asked. Ino's blue eyes shifted to her friend, surprised at the request. She hadn't spoken much with Sakura in this dimension, it felt odd. Haruno Sakura in her dimension was dead, had been for nearly 2 decades. Ino knew it wasn't an excuse, she spoke easily with Chuji, but for some reason she couldn't bring herself to face Sakura. She had tried at the beginning, but it didn't feel right. Ino could sense Sakura was tense, so she decided to break the ice a bit. With a devious smile she draped her arm on Sakura's shoulders. Need some love advice? Ino asked with a laugh. Sakura blushed. What? Don't be ridiculous. Ino chuckled. At least Sakura wasn't so stiff anymore. Relax, Sakura. Nothing wrong with admiring the hot guys. What hot guys? Sakura immediately retorted, no longer allowing her friend to taunt her. Ino pretended to ponder, I don't know. Kakashi. Sakura became flustered again. That's disgusting, Ino, he's my teacher. He was, Ino corrected, you are his equal in those regards now. Besides, don't deny checking him out. I know all about your crush. You're playing with fire, pig, Sakura hissed. Besides, that was a silly childish crush that ended years ago. Yeah, Ino brushed her off. The two girls stared at each other, then burst out laughing. Sakura suggested. Ino agreed. That's it for part 5. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.